Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. I would first like to review a couple of issues. This is the combined public meeting and executive session of the Arizona Department of Child Safety Community Advisory Committee. This is an open meeting. We are not going to include a call for public comments at this meeting. If you wish to have your comments considered by the committee, you may email communityadvisorycommittee@azdes.gov. The committee will review comments and determine whether action is necessary. The committee will only be able to address items that are not on the agenda. So the first, the focus of the meeting today, yes, sorry.
It's DCS.gov, the email address. Sorry about that.
Oh, it should be corrected then? This says AZDES, so it's DCS.gov. Okay. Sorry, I'm just reading, not thinking. What we hope to do today is to review, first of all, Judy Krysik's review of the Child Welfare Boards, Panels, Groups, and Committees, and kind of identify sectors needing further collaboration. We now have the DCS strategic plan, including the summary of the goals and objectives. And I'm going to ask Catherine Guffey from DCS to quickly go through this for us because she will be able to answer questions better than I might be able to. And then I'll ask Judy to discuss the list that they developed. And then I have the process that I outlined for you, the 4 questions that I passed out earlier. And while we are doing this, I want you to be thinking about the 4 things. First of all, do you feel your sector has engagement with DCS at the present time? Is there an objective in the strategic plan that you feel your sector could help implement? Please suggest one way in which your sector could support the implementation of the plan, and we'll put those up on the board. And then we should discuss and select priorities. So part of what we're looking at is what is our role unique from other committees? But our role is also defined in statute, and it really is to have more public sector engagement. So before we introduce Catherine, who's on the phone? Please state your name.
There's actually not anyone on the phone.
There's no one on the phone? Oh, they're not yet connected.
Dr. Conklin might be, but she's not answering yet.
Okay. So Kay, starting with you, can we have introductions for the record?
Sure. Kay Ekstrom, founder and past CEO of Christian Family Care. I think that's what I am.
That means.
Debbie Burdick. I'm the superintendent at Cave Creek Unified. I'm representing K-12 public education.
Good afternoon.
Not right now.
Good afternoon. I'm Peter Gentala. I'm the general counsel of Child Help.
I'm Nicole Roskens. I'm the clinical director for Cradle to Crayons with the Superior Court of Maricopa.
Emily Jenkins, Arizona Council of Human Service Providers.
I'm Robin Pearson, Voices for Casa Children Executive Director.
Judy Krysik, ASU School of Social Work.
Denise Ensdorff, CEO of Arizona's Children's Association.
Right, so we'll see if Dr. Conklin. So Catherine, would you just give us a quick run through here, please?
Sure. So I'm Catherine Guffey. I'm the Chief Quality Improvement Officer at DCS. And do you all have a copy of this? Okay, great. So we have, for fiscal year 2018, we've set out 5 strategic goals with performance measures and several activities related to each one. The first of these is improving timeliness to permanency with a measure of increasing the percentage of children achieving permanency in 12 months, which is a federal measure as well. We have been implementing the SAFE AZ model, which you're all familiar with. That's our safety assessment model, and actually expanding that into the ongoing policies and procedures, which will maybe have the biggest impact on the timeliness of permanency. Implementing statewide field standardization. There have been several activities around this. One is earlier transfer of cases to ongoing case managers, and that's been spreading across the state for quite some time now. We're also working on some standardization around ongoing field practices, so that work is just starting of improving our case planning processes, having quality contacts with parents and children and caregivers, increasing our use of team decision-making and things like that. We have some targeted permanency activities to reduce the number of children in out-of-home care. We've implemented several different types of case review processes, ranging from just a quick look at a case to see if there's something that we can quickly do to move the case to permanency, but then also categorizing those cases into things like cases that maybe need to be staffed for termination of parental rights and adoption, or that might benefit from what we call a targeted permanency staffing, which is a more in-depth discussion about the case to determine what activities might help to reunify the children. We have been expanding prevention and intervention services and supports. An example of that is the expansion of the Building Resilient Families program statewide. So that's the first goal. The second is to increase the placement of children in family-like settings, decreasing the number of placement moves that children have, so that's a placement stability indicator, and then also increasing the percentage of care days spent in family-like settings. We have been doing quite a bit of work around refining and implementing improved foster family recruitment processes, so just improving the timeliness, the speed at which we can do that, but also making sure that we're taking the time to recruit and license people correctly. Implementing standardized statewide placement process. We actually just created a new statewide placement unit that has standardized processes, and we'll continue to build on these of identifying what information do we need to know about the children and the caregivers to make the right match, hopefully avoiding congregate care as a first placement type, that we would like to get children to kinship or to foster families as their first placement whenever that's possible. And also there's work occurring with children who are currently in shelter or group home placements and trying to find family settings for them on a child-by-child basis. Improving supports to foster caregivers, and I would add that this includes a lot of support to kinship caregivers. We've been working to identify people who can contact kinship caregivers directly at the time a child is placed and make sure that they have what they need, and also provide ongoing support and information to kinship caregivers. Refining and implementing improved partnerships with foster care providers, again, making sure that they have the information that they need in order to care for the children, making sure that they have behavioral health services for children when that's needed. And then expanding the Fostering Sustainable Connections project. That's our project through the 4E waiver, where we conduct family finding activities for children who are in congregate care, which is a specific program designed to try to locate and develop connections for children in congregate care, hopefully that will be a caregiver, and if not, provide ongoing support as those youth are growing up. The next goal is improving employee retention with a target with performance measure of reducing employee turnover. So there are several things that we've been doing around that, of implementing an onboarding experience, providing leadership training, developing a leadership training program for all levels of leadership, from supervisors all the way through the director. Establishing a culture of safety and support for DCFs. This is known as safety science, and we've been receiving technical assistance around this of how do we create a culture where people feel safe to share, where there are areas where we can improve rather than feeling defensive, and creating a learning organization. Refine and implement an employee engagement strategy.
Peer support.
Yes, thank you.
Peer support.
Jenny's in charge of peer support, which is extremely important, recognizing the trauma that our staff themselves experience working in this high-stress environment. Developing and implementing the IT infrastructure, so I won't get into all of these details here, but this is our replacement of the child system with Guardian. We've recently provided tablets to all of our staff with mobile applications that let them have access necessary information when they're in the field and access to certain forms that they may need and the ability to enter some documentation as well. And then the final one is developing an implementation strategy for behavioral health services, and this has to do with the intended integration of behavioral health into DCS.
Anybody have any questions for Catherine? Thank you.
Welcome.
So Judy, would you like to kind of describe your project and what you all kind of found?
The reason that I provided this was that in an earlier meeting, we were talking about ways that this committee could be meaningfully involved in what we might take on. And I thought at that time that it's important to recognize that there are many groups who are looking at different aspects of the child welfare system. And that in our efforts to do that, that we would not want to duplicate or work in the same areas that these other groups are working in. So it's very broad, and I think that you can get an idea of the, everything from fatality to the Citizens Review Panel, which takes on different projects. But I think then it's helpful as well when we look at the statute around this committee to keep in mind our three, what we are supposed to provide, those three items in the statute, and that's what perhaps can set us apart from these other groups. So if we look at our purpose maybe more specifically with regard to those three and not cross over into these other areas. I don't know if people find that helpful, but
Well, this is actually a really nice list to have.
it's
in terms of-
surprising how much
Yeah,
there
I mean,
is.
there's probably people on here we should be, reaching out to or including or something.
I have a question,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be, I can ask you later, but this right here refers to CASA. And then you've already got CASA. This is guardian medical, this is CASA, this is foster care review board. So I think this might be a duplicate. Just
So, I guess with all of this that we're not going to be able to take in the next whatever.
And it might be as a, when we do decide on something or, a couple of things, at that point, looking through this and seeing where it might, like you said, reach out to a different group or look if there's already something going on in an area, contact the group to find out what they're doing that might cross over.
So I think that if you look at page 18, under the Community Advisory Committee, Judy has included, our statutory purpose. Judy, in looking at all of these, what would be your sense of what this committee might contribute to the overall process? Either looking at number 1 or number 2 on ours, which is page 18.
1, 2, or what about 3?
Yeah.
Because
The mandatory report.
Yeah,
You know what?
right.
You don't have the hotline on here. I was thinking this was a hotline. No, this is the mandatory report.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, if we look at them, say, take for instance the mandatory reporters, and a major source of reports is the education system. And so our group might have a charge to, reach out to people in the education system and try to understand with the changes at the hotline, have they, do they feel that's been helpful on their end? Do they feel that they understand, that they're trained well, that they're responded to? If we looked at here and we were to look at citizens review panels, we might, and we contacted them, we would learn that they're doing some work around medical providers because they're interested in medical neglect, and so they're want to survey medical providers. So that would be a way of coordinating, as an example, if we were to do mandatory reporting, looking at a group that's not already being looked at elsewhere. I think, what stands out to me in number 2 is the collaboration with the tribal. We have overrepresentation of American Indian children in care. Probably over a representation at every step of the process. And then in number 1, something that's not often looked at is the well-being. And so we pay more attention to stability in terms of number of placements, safety in terms of re-reports and re-entries, but the one area that's harder to get a handle on is the well-being. So those are sort of 3 pieces here. Now, if you go look at what Catherine just went over, the strategic planning and the objectives, then you say, I can also ask, how does this relate to that? These are kind of different. There's not an emphasis on reporting that was in the hotline previously, when the changes were made to the hotline. So I don't know if we're looking at the ways that this can complement the strategic plan, then we probably have to get more creative.
Well, we had talked at the last meeting about trying to look at, well, we didn't have the strategic plan to review. So we now have the strategic plan. And what we had discussed was, what might we do under number 2, collaboration, or even number 1, in terms of helping to implement the strategic plan. I guess now that we have the strategic plan, it might be appropriate to go back and ask ourselves, is that how we want to focus? Because we really do need to get a focus for this committee. Or we could focus part of our attention on the strategic plan, and we could look at other issues as well. I mean, I think it's up to the group to decide. I just feel like we really need to get out of here with some sense of where we could best utilize the resources on the committee. And I'm worried about the participation today. I'm thinking maybe we need to put up something and then maybe try to get more people engaged, even if on email before the next meeting. But so let's go back to the strategic plan for a minute. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. No, ask.
Right. So as I look at this, I see it as it's our role to inform the department, not to criticize, but to inform. And I think it's also for collaboration among other organizations. I'm just looking at the action words here, and to improve communication. If those are the 3 areas that we're tasked with doing, I feel like we can do those things, but each of us represents a part of the community. So it's taking the strategic plan, understanding the strategic plans, seeing how it is applicable in each of our individual areas, and then how we can add momentum to the plan through our own community, our own personal communities that we represent.
Yeah, that's exactly what we want to do today. I'm hoping that that's where we get.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do first is to just start with Denise and move down the table and say, Denise, you're here really representing both, I guess, behavioral health and child welfare, right? Do you feel your sector has engagement with DCS at this point?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Judy, you're in the educational realm.
Yes, I think not only ourselves, but in the sector more broadly, the education sector, post-secondary.
So Robin.
Great. I have some, do you want me to go through? Because there's some really specific things that
Well, we're going to do this first. We're going to
Just
work
do the first
through.
one. Yes,
like,
I'm
if you can
connected
just
with
let me
DCS.
do this little process.
Sure.
I hate process, but
Okay.
I'm afraid we're going to get so
understand the question.
distracted.
I didn't realize what you're doing. So you're doing question 1 only. Yes, I'm connected to DCS.
Okay.
Is your sector?
Sector.
My whole sector is.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And could we list what the sectors
Yeah,
are?
that would help, I think.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So we got courts. Yeah.
Advocacy centers, advocacy victim centers, and I would say yes, and there's different kinds of advocacy centers. There's intense and overlapping engagement where in the actual advocacy center, you have a DCS or an OCWI unit there.
Okay, you're co-located, basically.
When there's co-location.
Yeah.
Not every advocacy center, has day-to-day co-location.
Mhm.
So there's always engagement, but there's actually really strong
Mhm.
engagement when they're actually co-located.
Well, I represent public school districts, K-12. I would say yes, one-way communication or engagement where we're the mandatory reporters, but beyond that,
So it's not bi-directional?
That's not engagement then.
that's not
Yeah.
engagement.
No, okay.
That's- We report, and then honestly, it's rare that we have anything beyond that, which I would advocate for something more, for us to be helping.
Okay, so hold that.
Okay.
Hold that
Holding.
thought, we're going to
Holding.
come back to it. And Kay?
I think I represent the religious community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah?
So I could say, yes, some of it's very engaged,
Mm-hmm.
and other parts of it are probably not engaged at all.
Okay. So when you look at the objectives, we're going to do this round again. Is there an objective in the strategic plan, and it doesn't have to be one, that you would feel your sector could help implement? So let's roll it around, and we'll start with Nicole.
Okay, I'll start.
This would be
So-
courts, right?
Yes, so
Yeah, I don't
courts.
want to make one of the other end people feel that they made the wrong seat choice today.
So I would say with the courts, we're definitely involved with the overall goal of improved timeliness to permanency. We've been involved with the Safe AZ model and implementation of that. Reducing the number of children out of care.
Mhm.
With Cradle to Crayons, we've been involved with the prevention and intervention of services and supports,
Mhm.
expansion of that. The courts are somewhat involved with ensuring children are in family-like placements, because they're involved with placement decisions.
Mhm.
I stop there.
Okay, Peter?
Number 18, the last objective is, and I'm going to call this one out because I think there's a lot of opportunity there for advocacy centers, but because an advocacy center is essentially the first stop on the journey through the child welfare system for a lot of these young victims, one of the things that we hope to do is bring support, trauma counseling, and other behavioral health services early on, and identify the kids and the families that are good candidates to have those kinds of services, and then ideally as they continue, and perhaps if there's foster care or other things involved, those services can continue. There's all the objectives 5 through 9 under placement. I'm gonna take that back.
Want to take that back?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a whole lot in terms of, there's a lot, anything at the beginning of the process, there's a lot of opportunity for advocacy centers to be involved. And just finally, in terms of investigation, I think when Catherine was describing the first 4 objectives in terms of the timeliness of it, I think there's a lot there that goes into the training that's involved with staff, the processes, the procedures. I know it's always important, and with all the advocacy centers, not just child health, but all of them, to really, when you're working in a multidisciplinary process where you've got law enforcement agency and healthcare and behavioral health and the department, our processes sometimes can get a little bit tangled, and it's so important for us to be able to kind of cross the jurisdictions and communicate. So to the extent that there's processes and procedures that are being ironed out under, say, Objective 2, implementing statewide field standardization.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of thing where there would be overlap with advocacy centers.
Okay. Del, do you want to? Education?
For education, I want to start by saying perhaps 3 and 4. The challenge is once children are identified and perhaps removed, we don't know who they are, where they've gone. We know who they were. We don't know what happens once we call. We have a great opportunity in our education programs for adults, including how to manage behavior, how to have appropriate discipline. We have programs for parents all the time, but when I read targeted permanency activities, I'm not sure if that's related to the parents, perhaps that children have been removed from, could benefit from those, and maybe it would just be school districts giving information to the agency on what activities are being offered to parents of children in the school districts that parents could benefit from as part of those activities. And I'm not sure if that's what number 3 is talking about. That would tie into number 4.
So, yeah, let's do that under number 3 then.
Okay.
You're seeing, but what about but that's still that kind of one-sided communication. So think about when we get to the other part about what do you need from DCS?
Oh, well, I don't know that the law allows for what
But
we
that,
need from
okay.
DCS to get that from DCS. But then if you go down to foster caregivers, there's more information that we have. Typically, the foster parents will offer that they have children in foster care. So number 7, improve supports to foster caregivers. There's a lot of information that we can either give the agency or we do give to those folks. Sometimes they don't know to ask or pay attention to the huge amount of information that schools send out to know that some of those things might be helpful to them. So it might be us being better, or the school districts, at maybe having those families flagged so we can have our counselors give that information to those families, and we could do a better job. And then for 10 and 11, we do a lot of leadership training, we do a lot of staff training. It's not just an educational realm, but also leadership in general. And of course, everything we do training on relates to interacting with children. So maybe there's some way that we could help with 10 and 11 in providing some training or inviting employees when it's appropriate to different trainings that school districts have. But at first blush, that's all I could come up with.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I think probably looking at the broader religious community and thinking specifically about congregations, that it would fall into the broad second category of increasing placement of children in a family-like setting. I think there's a reluctance often on the part of religious people to get involved with the state. So there's just there's a wall there, and to figure out how to break down that wall, I don't know. I think that the Safe Families program is a beginning in terms of making it easier for families to foster. And I think the new Care Portal program, which is just getting started here, is a way to engage the church community and introduce them to the needs of these youngsters, which we hope, certainly in our little church, that that'll grow into families catching a vision for fostering. So I think those programs are good starts. It's how to expand them.
Okay, so I'll realized I kind of flew over myself on the last one, on the last round, so I'll catch up here a little. So in terms of improving supports to foster caregivers, and I would include kinship families and adoption families in this.
Right.
You know, the council's doing the Bruce Perry project where we are both offering opportunities for foster parents to participate in and observe training program on how to deal with trauma-based, behaviors that really come out of that trauma experience, how to improve the caregiving, the parenting. And then we're also going to start on Monday our training program for 50 people who will be trained as trainers in the neurosequential model. And that is going to include, fortunately, a couple of folks from one of the African American community groups that's worried about overrepresentation of African American children in the system. And they're offering training programs in parenting through the churches. So we're going to have a couple of women participate in that to get trained in the model. So this is going to give us statewide, through our child welfare members, statewide coverage with trainers who are trained in a 2-year project in how to use this theoretical model to improve the parenting education for foster parents and kinship families around trauma issues. One of the other areas that I think we from the behavioral health could be assisting, so that's number 7. We obviously can be somewhat of a resource on the behavioral health integration CMDP issue. We've already put some effort. We'll be putting some effort in that. I think through our child welfare committee, we feel very connected. Catherine comes, Mike Faust comes. You know, our folks are really looking at the SAFE model, whatever we can do to have better permanency activities, to reduce the number of children in care. What through the collective impact project, we will be looking at expanding prevention and intervention services. So I think that's those are the ways that we kind of come into that. So Robin, you want to?
Well, what about this last one for you? The develop implementation strategy for behavioral health services.
Well, we will be commenting on we've been participating in the Mercer project to really look at what the whole system issues are going to be, and we will be commenting on those proposals as they go forward and reviewing and participating in the meetings around this. You know, I have to tell you, quite frankly, I don't know whether it's better to have one agency to deal with on these issues or whether it's better to have 10 or 12 healthcare plans that don't understand behavioral health to work with. It's a real, you know, the more we have worked under the proposed new world order, we're really concerned about how much people really understand what is involved in providing behavioral health services to children. So this is going to be an ongoing process for the next couple of years. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know that anybody does. But what have
You're
you?
definitely engaged.
You're engaged, yeah.
All right, so as a court-appointed special advocate working with the court and working with DCS on a case-by-case basis, we've moved through several of these, but the more interesting thing that I think is happening for us as we move towards 2018 is that the court leadership has been working with us about family finding and how we can work through the court-appointed special advocates who are having those one-on-one relationships with the child using I'm going to call it Bob Friend's family finding training to engage the child in those kind of conversations and what kind of support the nonprofit can give in supporting the CASAs through that kind of methodology. But it would need to be a very close connection with DCS and their execution so it all comes together in the right way in the right family team meetings. So we're just finalizing and having those conversations and budgeting for them for next year. But I love that it's on here and so prominently on here, because I think this is the answer for a lot of the children in the permanency that we're all looking for. So, very excited, by the way. I saw that this morning. I was very excited. Thank you, Kim.
Judy?
So I think in terms of the post-secondary sector, definitely training, and that could be the development of training, the delivery of training, the preparation of the workforce. We have instructional designers and curriculum writers, and the university deals a lot in online as well as in-person education and continuing education. For services, the evaluation of services and the evaluation of training, legislative advocacy, examining best practices, expanding prevention and intervention services, and not necessarily for child welfare involved families, but it could be for other families that might be at risk of becoming involved with the child welfare system.
Denise?
So for both, I'm going to talk child welfare and behavioral health. I'll just do the numbers, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9.
Wait a minute, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9?
12, and 18.
Okay.
Which 12 I was looking at, but I do think that the interaction between behavioral health workers and DCS workers and child welfare workers and DCS workers, there's a lot that can be done to improve and support DCS staff. But the other ones I think are more obvious as far as how providers could support the other ones.
Mm-hmm. Anybody want to add anything to that? Or they thought of something they didn't think of before? Okay, so let's move then to the final question. I'm sorry, the third question, not the final thing. Please suggest one way in which your sector could support the implementation of the plan. This may be a little duplicative, but in order of capturing this, would somebody be willing to put this up on the board? Somebody who can write legibly, because that's not me. Judy, we've got a whole host of opportunities here for you to pick whatever color makes you happy. Or combination. So who'd like to lead off with this?
I just have a question before we get started. So
Okay.
I kind of threw out the way that, but this is something that we're working on, that we're going to engage with DCS on the family finding piece
I think
of
it's
things.
okay.
So is that part of this committee, or is this something that's this is going to move forward?
Regardless.
Yeah.
Well, so is this a statewide effort or is this a local effort?
It's being trained up in Flagstaff, so I think I don't know that everybody will have the funding, but we will have.
Oh,
the
are you
funding,
doing
yeah.
the family finding training thing up there
Well,
that Virginia's working on?
Somebody has done the family
Yeah,
finding
yeah,
training up
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And
The Coconino for Kids.
But-
Yeah.
it's taking it the next step and actually engaging people in the act of family finding. So I don't know if that's what I'm trying to
I
understand.
think that would be appropriate, and I think what you should identify with that is what is going to be the relationship between DCS and CASA around this?
And if this committee helps to figure that out and engage with DCS in that way, that would be a helpful thing.
Or I think this is an opportunity for us to inform DCS for this effort to be successful through CASA. What are you going to need from them?
Right.
And could they maybe, kind of have you a liaison or someone whoever's responsible for, identify a strategic initiative objective? Because there is a staff person who's responsible for this, who could become perhaps a liaison to you all or whoever's in charge of your effort. Because you're going to need to be able to communicate around those issues with the DCS.
Right, there's some more intricacies
that will have
involved
to
that I'm
come
not
out.
really going into here. that are
Right,
gonna
sure.
require that, yeah.
Yeah, so why don't you lay that out?
Okay, so please suggest one way in which your sector could support the implementation of the plan. My sector could engage CASA DCS family finding. Thank you so much.
Would you just summarize for all of us?
We'll babble and you just summarize, okay?
You know, she's a teacher, she's good at this stuff. Yeah. Okay, so I think you want to talk a little bit more about that, just in terms of, so the CASA volunteers have been going through the family finding training?
No.
No.
No, that's the discussion where the leadership of the court and CASA have all been having discussions about how could family finding be expanded through the use of court-appointed special advocates.
Okay.
So they would all need to be trained, but not all of them would need to go through the in-depth training. So we're specifically interested in legal orphans that rights have been severed, and we're looking for family finding goes back and looks in their history and surrounds them with 40 connections. May or may not lead to placement. It's just connections. So, but if the CASA is already having all these conversations with the child, it also has exercises like creating a tree of life. It has genograms where you look at their background. So there's steps and methodologies behind it. I think CASAs would need support for that kind of methodology, so that's where the nonprofit would come involved and have people help them through those processes. But once the 40, say, are identified, the family group team meeting or decision-making meeting would then be facilitated either by DCS or, we would have to agree to who does what in that final stage. So I think there's things that need to be worked out, but I think everybody's very excited about adding additional resources to enhance what DCS is already doing.
So that seems really aligned with the Fostering Sustainable Connections in the 40 waiver, because they're
It's
doing a
a-
lot of that stuff. So maybe connecting.
It is, except I think that's focused
It's focused at a
primarily
certain
on
age.
getting children out of congregate care. This would be more focused on legal orphans in that process. So
So would you put that under 3? Or where would you put that?
9,
9? Oh, you would put it under 9, okay.
it's fostering sustainable connections.
Okay,
But I think it helps what you're doing, but it maybe takes it another
It's an
step.
expansion of it.
First. But it also, by taking it further and working with a different group, you're now bringing permanency faster in some cases. Not all, but in some cases. So it's
So-
probably those two areas.
So you're accomplishing the overall first and second goal of permanency and family-like setting.
yeah, yeah,
So goals 1 and 2?
not 2. That's
I would say-
field standardization.
Well,
Where would
No,
you-
the goal, not the
Goal.
objective.
yeah,
Oh, the goal. I'm sorry, goal
Improve
1.
timeliness to permanency is CASA's goal in general.
Yeah.
Okay.
So more
Right.
specifically.
That's goal 1.
Right.
Definitely goals 1 and
So-
2.
Right.
So
So
let me
that's
ask you a
goal.
question, Robin. Even if you don't find a family in those 40 connections, can you find people who can be connected with that child so they feel some connection to a family even if they aren't living with them?
Correct, so
Correct?
the methodology is designed to do exactly that, where you'll have, Aunt Susie can't take him as a placement, but Aunt Susie can send him a birthday card every year, come by on Christmas time and make sure he's got
Yeah.
family around him, that kind of thing. So it doesn't necessarily lead to permanency, but it leads to a feeling of connectedness and that you are not alone in the world.
So
Yeah.
permanent connection.
Well, which is a really big thing, really. I mean, so,
There's other organizations who are involved
Yeah, we
in
do
that.
that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And I think this is just one more avenue and another feet on the street
Yep.
that would expand the program.
Mhm. Okay, so we've got that one. Denise, you want to take a shot at this? You got a lot of these things here, so,
I don't know what one to pick.
Well, you're really helping us with the Bruce Perry thing, because you've got a number of your staff who are involved in that, so.
I really think the first and second goal and everything under those is really where the majority of our work can help move the needle. So it's connected to, the decreased number of placement moves, the timeliness to permanency, all of that, the family finding stuff. It's all of how we recruit foster parents, how we train foster parents, the Bruce Perry work, that reduces, placements for kids, reduces kids being moved, all of that.
Trauma-informed care, would that be
Yeah, it's all
kind of an
That's
initiative
all
around?
practices.
Does that capture trauma-informed care?
Yeah, it's not all of it, but that's a piece of it, definitely.
Yeah, so one of the goals of the Bruce Perry project is to reduce the number of behavioral disruptions
Yep.
by increasing the capacity of the foster family, the kinship family, to be able to parent and not feel frustrated or unsafe or whatever's causing, and to reduce the number of foster parents who are dropping out. Maintain a better level of foster care retention, maybe. So,
your organization would provide training to support trauma-informed care, among other things, to support this business plan, or the strategic plan?
Hopefully we're doing trauma-informed work and recruitment and training, all of that with our staff and our foster parents, which would impact all of this down the road. But that's what we're doing. That's not what we're doing in connection with them to support them, I guess, too.
but then I think, Denise, you need to speak a little bit from your sector, not just from your
Right.
agency.
Right. So I do think as a sector, this is where we hone, goals 1 and 2 is where we all land and where we have the most ability to support DCS in moving the needle. If I have to pick the objectives, that's really hard.
I don't think so, but it's by implementing practices that are consistent with what?
Implementing practices that will move the needle on permanency and number of placements and prevention, in moving upstream in prevention and early intervention. Which are discussions we're having with DCS about what would that look like, what could we do,
And I think the child welfare providers are really interested in the targeted permanency activities and how they could be supportive of those efforts so that we can keep the kids in home. You wrap the services around or whatever, and that's like 3.
Yeah, I think 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 are really where my sector would have the most impact. And then 18.
And then 18. Okay, Kay, do you want to start from that end?
I think probably the area that, if you look at the larger church community, number 5, refining and implementing improved foster family recruitment would be the place to focus the energy. I think that's where the families are. And finding a way to make that something that people will respond to.
So would it help, Kay, if there are some faith groups that I think are really focused on this, aren't they?
Yes.
Aren't there?
Sure.
I'm asking those folks, Scott, too. Would it help to have something where people from one church could come and present to another church about this is what we're doing and this is how it works for us?
Oh, I think that would help.
So
Yeah,
somehow
that would be great.
to connect up
To connect up what's happening.
the faith
And
community.
to better, having worked within the church community for too many years. Churches like to do their own thing, and they don't buy in readily to a canned project, and here it is. So if we could find a way to let the churches think it was their idea, or make it something that they could fit to their.
Adapt to their
right,
community, yeah.
So that it would be comfortable to them. I think that's some of the resistance that exists. You come with a set process, and that's why I think Safe Families is a beginning. But to just spread that word, and yes, I think you're right, Emily, if churches that are already doing it could share with other churches, and some do it a lot better than others, so.
Let me ask Catherine, on the SAFE model, somewhere I saw this, and that was, you were also reaching out to people to see, we need a bed, we need something, this family needs,
That's
whatever,
care
the care
portal.
portal. Could the churches, could the faith communities maybe start with something like that, where you're really saying, does anybody have a whatever? I mean, through the care portal?
Jenny, do you have much information about the care portal meeting? No.
No, they just need to contact Sue Smith to get on the list. So it's a distribution list. So we have a family that needs an AC unit or whatever. They'll send an email through the care portal, whatever. The churches are signed up through that. And it's Sue Smith in our office. I don't know if you know her, but we can get contact information to you all.
Or care portal, or.
It's not, it really is the kind of the grassroots way to begin with churches. Our church is doing care portal. So
Already?
It's already in place.
Okay.
It's already in place in Maricopa County, and there's a number of churches that are doing it. And it's an email. We're going to promote it in November in our church. I mean, we're just signed up. We haven't done anything yet, but we're going to promote it as, are you willing to read an email? You don't have to respond. All you have to do is read the email, and then if it's something you can do,
Yeah.
then, and I think enough of those, because they come with a little bit of a case history. I mean, I think about one that just came through about a mom who's struggling to keep her infant with her, and she moved into an apartment and needs everything. And when people identify with that kind of thing, and then identify with grandparents that are struggling to keep their grandkids. So I think the care portal expansion is.
Well, that might be the nose under the tent. I mean, people go, gee, that sounds like a really, you start getting emotionally connected to the kids.
But oftentimes, once you're exposed, then that's what grows
Yeah.
people into the
Right.
next step.
Pulls them into the
coming.
next level.
And here again, to do Safe Families, which doesn't have the same onerous implications of full foster care. Why, I mean, it's getting people kind of in the door. So
I think the leadership
I think that's the area where the focus ought to be on the church community.
The leadership of the care portal would love help in spreading this to more churches.
Yes.
So the bigger the care portal is, I mean, that can be preventative. It can keep a family together.
Absolutely.
So, they don't go there.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the positives about the program, is that it has a strong preventive approach, so.
So are we putting the care portal under number 3?
Yes.
Where is it?
Yeah, 4.
4? Okay. Oh, yeah, okay, right. You got that, Judy? Can you put a number by those when you're doing
And
that?
then the
Yes.
foster recruitment is what number?
Recruiting,
Um,
AZ
recruitment
127
is,
most effective,
Yeah.
I don't know if most effective so far.
Online, you
It's
go
number
down.
5.
Number 5. So you're really looking at 4 to
Yes.
5.
Yeah.
Boy, that's lovely. Really good job. You're going to have a permanent job here pretty soon. Okay. Hey, are we ready for you? We ready for you? Bill, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry.
So I just.
Haven't switched minds yet. Okay,
Are you switched?
go ahead.
Okay, so I looked back, and I just have to make a statement about this, to our advisory committee duties membership, 8-459. And number 3 is to improve communication between mandatory reporters in the department. So I kind of have to go back to the fact that schools have preschool all the way to grade 12, and sometimes with special education students to age 22. And we identify a lot of students and children that end up in the system. But again, it's that one-way reporting. So I would love to be able to help with goal 1 with prevention and working on permanency and actually not having that even have to be an issue, because we educate our parents on how to work with their children also. But at this point, that's not an option. So I will move on to goal 2, and as I said before, number 7, improve supports to foster caregivers. There are so many ways that we can support foster care parents and guardians with children. I just think they don't know that the school can be that resource. And again, I'll take ownership on that also, but unless they identify when they enroll the students, we don't always have that information or keep that information. You may have it identified at registration in a front office, but perhaps we can have a system in the schools that better identifies those students and keep track of that, and have our counselors and social workers, student support service people work on assisting those foster families.
Well, you also have a lot of kinship families as well as foster
Yes,
families, I
yes.
would expect, yeah. Okay, Robert. Peter.
Going to me?
Okay, I'm not
Close
doing
enough.
names well today. Peter, I'm sorry.
You're very close. Robert's my dad. So I'm in thinking about just the victim community, victim services community. Maybe one of the best roles that it can play with just the rest of the services that are available out there is a connecting point. A lot of times, the victim community is kind of a first-in-time connection with the child and the family, and can introduce a lot of services and kind of help them understand what they can expect from this point forward. And looking at objectives 3 and 4, for example, for any, you think of a family. Let's just take an example: a family that their child was dropped off at school in the morning, and in the afternoon they have an appointment at an advocacy center, and they don't understand why. And then they find out why later when they have an interview with a victim advocate or with a counselor or with personnel from DCS, and they learn that there's a very good chance that their child has been the victim of a crime, and there's just the whole world has been turned upside down in the course of that counseling session. So there's a lot of, this is kind of the first opportunity, in some cases it's the first opportunity to really bring information and to empower them with information and help them kind of start the journey from that stage of being a victim, but also moving on to surviving, getting through it, and understanding what they can do to improve their situation and who is there to help them. So I think most of the things I see are going to be on the permanency side, because there's still a question. Permanency is what is very much in jeopardy at that point, so early on. And I'll just from perspective of our agency, and I would think a lot of other victim services agencies are no exception to this. It just kills our staff that they are there at that beginning point, and they see the child in that vulnerable position, and then the rest of the story is, shrouded from them. And so one of the ways that, one of the things I think you see in the victim services community is we want to do more. We want to get involved in wraparound services. We want to do more with family supports. We don't just want to say, we're going to do what we can do for you right now, and then God bless you, good luck with the rest of your journey. And so I see a lot of advocacy centers that are trying to do more than just be involved in the initial criminal investigation and harm mitigation part, but they also want to move on and do more. And that's why I started talking about behavioral health, is because I think there's a trend line of more victim services that want to transition into helping with trauma-informed care and behavioral health.
And to stay connected with them.
And to stay as
So
connected
they don't
as
want to be
possible.
just the emergency room, they want to be involved in
Yeah.
it. It is
Yeah.
hard, yeah.
Or at least, and if there's not anything else that can be done at the agency, to be a solid referral point to, provide the
Mhm.
next kind of step in the care for that family or that child.
Okay.
Can I just say
Yeah.
one thing about the faith community too?
Yeah.
I think we were kind of talking around it, but there is the AZ 127 group is a group of, I think of it as a parachurch organization. By that I mean it's not founded by a church, it's founded by a coalition of churches. But, and the whole point to what they do is foster care recruitment. And they do that by reaching out to the churches. So they'll say, are you running a recruitment program among your congregation? Would you like us to help you set one up? Would you like us to help you do an informational meeting and that type of thing? So
So that's AZ 127?
AZ 127 is the name of it, and I think it's a great start. I don't know what the actual
So did you get that, Kay?
numerical.
Could you
outcome
share a
is.
contact with Kay, maybe?
Okay.
Oh, do you have it? You have it, okay.
Very much involved in that effort. But that's just to give an example of, I just want to mention that as a concrete example of how that actually can happen. It's totally true that the balkanization of the faith community is the major challenge. But if there's going to be any coalescing, it's going to be through kind of efforts like that where there's voluntarily, we would love to bring that training in. So thank you for that.
Because I was trying to remember the name of it, I just couldn't, the coalition. No, I think that's a great way to do it. All right.
All right, so the courts and DCS have to be very much aligned in the number one goal, improved timeliness to permanency. So there's a lot of work going on with that, but I think the key thing is that when changes are implemented and processes, either side, that communication is really strong.
Is it strong enough, or does it need to be improved?
I think it's much stronger than it used to be, definitely, but I think there's always room for improvement.
Okay, so a continued effort at improving, and especially if you go to the warrant thing and all these other changes,
There's
right?
a lot.
There's a lot.
The safe AZ model,
yeah.
warrant changes, the reduction of kids in care.
I know that
So
Kris
could we pull-
Jacober is not here, but if
Yeah.
she were here, would you mind if I share what I think she would?
Yeah, sure, yeah. I'm just, before you do that, Robin, let me just ask a question, and that would be, is it timeliness, is it adequacy, is it what? How would you think that the communication needs to be improved? Are there, because just talking about
In general.
in general, it doesn't lend itself to anything very specific, unless what you think you all need to do is sit down at some point and talk about how you might work on it. But I know there's a lot going on, and it's going to be hard for all the DCS staff to get used to this too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so, and then you've got your folks to train, but you want to think about that a little?
I do
You could-
want to think
you
about
could-
that a little bit.
Yeah. So you want to give us Kris's
I
perspective?
just think that if, I don't want to, I am
You can
speaking
speak
for
to her,
I
and
guess.
we'll check with her,
Okay,
but go ahead.
okay.
Yeah.
But I think that she represents the foster care community, and I think she has strong feelings towards that more needs to be done to help the kinship care. And She just thinks that there's some more opportunities between DCS and kinship care, and I did see that on the list here, so I know she would point that out quickly when she's here.
Where are we going to put that in? 7?
Or,
Yes.
Improved supports to foster
I think
caregivers
so.
and kinship families.
yeah.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, and I think Denise would weigh in, that we really don't do enough for the kinship families. And if they did not step up to the plate, my gosh, what a problem we would have. Plus, it's really important for children to be in a family. I mean, but thinking about getting 4 grandchildren all at once, I just, I mean, it's hard, even, and, the older they get, the more complicated, and it's just tough. And a lot of kinship families have children of incarcerated parents.
Yeah.
They are the children of, they get the kids because the parents are incarcerated, excuse me. And Judy's doing a conference on that, but the needs of those children, the complexity of the family relationships, the anger and the resentment and the frustration, and I know that kinship families are also a really big issue for the tribes.
For the tribes.
Yes, huge issue for the tribes. And
across
They
the
want them to
building.
have priority over.
yeah, because that's just more of the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just had a question when you're done.
Go ahead.
As I look at the strategic plan and I look at the second goal about children and family-like setting, we have a lot of, not a lot, but there are objectives that talk about foster caregivers. I know perhaps kinship families are considered foster caregivers, but I wonder, I think they have a unique situation, and I wonder why they're not called out in writing on the strategic plan.
Catherine, do you think you could speak to
Yeah,
that?
I think that we did consider them to be part of the foster caregiver population, and like I said, there are actually a lot of activities going on in the department that are specifically around supporting kinship caregivers. So it's not something that's lost on us, and it's certainly important, and it seems like the schools could have a big role to play in that.
They would love to.
Well, one of the things is not all the kinship families understand that they can use kind of modified rules to become a foster parent, and then there's more reimbursement. That's an educational thing, because sometimes these are just informal arrangements. Yes, and
That aren't
then,
even connected with DCS.
yeah, they're not even connected with DCS. They may not even know what resources might be available to them. So that, I think, is probably where the schools could be
Do some prevention.
yeah, you could do some early intervention
Yeah.
or whatever, in terms of information that, there might be some resources available to you.
So-
Some families don't want anybody, I mean, they have, they
They're
don't
private.
want to do it.
Yeah,
but,
but so how would the schools get something that they could provide? I mean, you hate to send someone to a website. There's just too much there, or they don't find the right information. So would it just be a pamphlet or a one-pager on foster?
Yeah, so I think it would probably be, when you're talking particularly informal kinship families, it would be, a flyer or whatever about resources in the community, about, guardianship clinics or support groups or whatever it is, people they can connect with that have those resources and have those
So
services.
when I was working on the Children of Incarcerated Parent Project in Tucson, we did, and I think Claire Shuren,
Yeah.
we provided to the department, we did a little brochure called, "Are You Raising Someone Else's Child?" And it had information about a lot of that, and it had information about if they were it was somewhat focused around children whose parents were incarcerated, because it was how the court system works. But there were resources that were sort of
Yeah.
local, we kind of did it with, if you're in what part of the state you were in. And I know I provided that to somebody over there at DCS who was working on the Children of Incarcerated Parent kind of little guideline thing that you were working on, Catherine. Do you remember? I don't remember who this was. But it might be worth it to put some kind of little brochure out that could be directed towards kinship families,
Or-
that was informational.
Or even just a place on the website that could be linked to that, because all schools have electronic newsletters, all districts, I assume most districts have a district newsletter, and that could be something we could give out. Schools give their newsletters out every week, and they're electronic in our district, and I think many districts are going that way. So if we had a link that would send them right to the information on the DCS webpage or a foster care network, that we could be getting that information out for those people that are more private and don't want to ask.
Yeah, and with the stigma issues, people don't always want to, or their fear of the department. I mean, yeah.
The woman come and present from DCS on kinship. Remember that?
Yes, Ursula.
Ursula, and she had a brochure.
She's got all the.
So maybe there's already something out there then.
That's what I would assume.
There is, yeah.
Okay.
So how do we get access to that would be my question.
So let me ask DCS, do you all have a communication listserv for the school districts?
No, we need to build that up.
Well, I happen to be in the building where all of the school people are. The School Board Association and all of that. I mean, I bet I could get a list for you. Do you want me to?
I think we can just put in a record request with Department of Education and.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
all
there
right.
you go.
That way.
Yeah.
Okay,
And then from there, it's a matter of developing materials that would be useful to the school district.
Be great.
but, so, well, I would think you'd want to have a listserv like that anyway, just to get any changes out or anything. But anyway, so DCS website that the school districts could access, right? A link on the DCS website that the school districts could access. Do you have that down, Judy?
Yes, I'm writing right now.
Okay, I don't want to start another one until you. Okay, these are good. We should just sit and talk to each other. See, we could just solve problems while we're doing this. We don't really have to. I know the other thing that we are hearing from our child welfare providers are two things. One of them is they're getting children with multiple placements, 15, 17, 25. And I was really going to raise the question. I think we ought to look at what intervention should be taking place. I don't know what the level is, but I would say by the time the child hit 5 placements or 4 placements within a short period, reasonably short period of time, that somebody should be reviewing that child's situation to see if a different level of care might be appropriate. Or does that happen anyway? Because what we're seeing especially in the HCTC homes, are extremely violent children. And foster parents are dropping out because they have been injured, or their other people in the family have been injured, and I think this is a question between behavioral health and child welfare, which is, what is the appropriate placement for those children, and are there barriers to those children getting assessed and getting into an appropriate level of care? Because there are various levels of care, but it doesn't do the child any good to fail at 15 or 16 placements. The foster parents get burned out because they don't feel like they can handle the children. And so this is an area for some exploration in terms of trying to move children to permanency, but it also comes in terms of whether congregate care. If you're going to reduce the number of children in congregate care, you have to have manageable behavior in a family-like setting. And so to get to that, there are the high acuity children who need some attention about what interventions might take place that would help this child not be kind of consigned to institutional care till they're 18.
I think DCS runs up against a wall with that though, because then you're dealing with the REBAs. Because it's the REBAs who pay for the placements. And there has been change over the last few years about the philosophy and what we have to go through to get an acceptance for a child to go into a higher level care outside of HCTC. So I think there's only so much that DCS can do.
Can you comment on that?
Well, I just made a note that for one thing, I'd be interested in knowing how many children do we have and what kind of placements have they been in? If they've had 15 to 20, that seems extremely high. So I'm wondering if some of those were institutional type placements and, I know there's some population of children who have, shelter, runaway, detention, hospital, and it's kind of
So it all
the
adds
cycle
up.
for these. And
Yeah.
those are some of our children with a lot of placement, so.
Well, Catherine, someone said at the meeting we were in that though kids were supposed to be reviewed after 6, was that the number?
6 placements?
That after the 6th,
Oh, that DCS does a review?
that I think that CMDP or somebody was supposed to be doing a review, or DCS was supposed to do a review when the child hit their 6th or 7th placement.
I'm not
And-
familiar with that in particular, but, all of our children have reviews through court hearings and case plan staffings and CFTs in particular for children that, I'm assuming if you have that many placements, there are probably some behavioral health services
Yeah.
being provided.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of opportunities to review the situation of those children. So I think it's a question of, can we look at those in an aggregate to see if there are trends that we can deal with systemically, or are these children who, we serve them better by looking at each case individually through those processes and making sure that there's an avenue to advocate for what they need?
Well, you might look at disruptions in the HCTC homes.
Okay.
See, and I think because of some of the changes in how placement occurs, you have more volatile kids in HCTC that 2 years ago would have gone into residential care. And so
So what are those changes, and are they the right changes? Are they not the right changes? Is it a funding discussion? I think it's worth looking at, just to understand.
Emily, if it's a school-age child, and they are determined to be medically diagnosed to have a behavioral issue, or their behavior comes under the special ed realm, we have special programs, many of the schools, for emotionally disabled students. We give psychological evaluations that don't cost the taxpayer anything. And if the student's already been identified by a medical professional to have a disability to be considered behavioral or emotionally disabled, they fast track into those programs. And a local school district, although it's challenging, pays for placements, not ones
Those are
that are
very hard to
overnight,
get.
but
Yeah.
schools for children that can't work in a regular setting.
Right.
But the challenge then becomes, if they're moved so many times, that sometimes is looked at why they are disabled, and then they wouldn't perhaps fall under that umbrella. So there's kind of a challenge there, but I think that would be an avenue to look at also. Provide some stability, especially if it's outsourced to a special school. That would be some stability for the child, at least during the day.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is all going to come up under 18.
Yep.
Yeah.
In terms of
18.
a dialogue, over the next few months about the Mercer's looking at kind of all the cost issues, but I think there will be a dialogue. I hope there will be a dialogue around some of these issues.
Right.
And Catherine, we could get you together with the people who've been pulling the information together on the HCTCs.
Okay.
Because our concern is whoever has responsibility for the children's system, we need to be looking at the right placement at the right time for the right kid. Not, you got to fail 4 or 5 times before we'll think about an authorization for something. And that could be very challenging to accomplish. But It's not doing our kids any good
Right.
to go through this.
Or the parents.
Or the
HCTC
parents, yeah.
So that's also then number 3, because you mentioned you're looking at stability under number 3, I think.
Yeah, that would be 3 and 18.
I also think that might be important to look back through the behavioral health system at when that child was first coming into care, what was provided to them, because through my years in the field of behavioral health, a lot of times they're not provided appropriate
Absolutely,
services in the beginning,
Yep.
or you'll hear, well, that kid was brought in 3 times, he wouldn't talk, so he doesn't need therapy. Well, a severely traumatized child is not going to
Gonna
talk in the
talk.
first 3 sessions.
Yeah.
So looking back at what was provided in the beginning, and maybe some changes could be made there also.
Yep.
Well, I think the other thing is we had this period where we had a lot of kids in care.
Yes, we did.
Those kids some of them are still kind of in that system. And there's not much, we need to do what we can. I'm hoping that we're moving towards a situation where we won't have so many kids in the future. But I also think that there are some of these kids that aren't going to be able to be in a home-like setting. So when you're looking at reducing the children in congregate care, we really need to, there is a role for congregate care because there may not be any other place for them. Or older children, are not, maybe who disrupted a number of times, are probably not going to be open to being in a foster care placement.
Well, and recruiting and retaining HCTC parents is just so
Hard.
difficult. And we have, over the last couple of years, lost a lot of HCTC parents, and for good reason. So that's the other part, is I worry about a piece of our continuum of care that isn't going to be as readily accessible as it once was. Because I also don't think it's being used appropriately.
Yeah.
You mean the group homes? Is that
HCTC.
HCTC.
Therapeutic foster care, yeah.
Okay. So looking at stability and higher levels of care, so HCTC homes, and looking at disruptions. And then looking at schools, special placements, assessments as a way of maybe stabilizing some of
At least the
those.
kid's got somewhere stable to go.
Could you
And what is
define,
HCTC?
yeah, HCTC?
It's therapeutic foster care.
Okay.
It's home care it's a crazy.
It is a word.
Home care
Home care to
to,
training client or something.
it's weird, but
It's a weird name.
therapeutic foster care is more accurate
Yes.
term. And you have, in that setting, you have basically like almost professionally
Right.
trained people.
Right.
They get paid more and they can only have one or two
Yeah.
children. Yeah. And it's a great place for a kid to be able to get,
What they need.
get what they need and be in a setting where they can be in a home-like setting.
Well, as I recall, it pays enough so that both parents could be able to be home and
Yeah.
parent. And that's what these
Yeah,
kids need,
yeah.
so.
Let's see, is there anybody left?
Judy?
Judy, you need to,
Oh, yeah, Judy.
So I was thinking, one I didn't mention earlier that is quite exciting that a lot of post-secondary institutions are working on is supporting the older youth and the transitional youth. It's just remarkable, I think, how they're using the peer-to-peer model. So people who have been successful are talking to the younger kids, and now they're talking to kids at younger ages in foster care. So I think there's a lot of room for expanding those activities. One thing in terms of coordinating with DCS that we've found that I think a lot of child welfare workers, could be foster parents, could be other providers who work with the youth, don't have good information on pathways to post-secondary education. And so there's a lot of misinformation that causes kids to want to go the independent living route rather than guardianship or adoption, because they think they won't be supported to have a post-secondary education. So there could be improved communications around that, for sure.
now, is that part of what Pete is doing down in Tucson with the
Foster ed.
foster ed, or is that lower level.
They have that's more educational championship
Okay.
through high school, right?
Okay,
Having an
through high
education.
school,
So it
not-
could
not
be
post-secondary.
But it could be
to that.
related, it could connect, I mean, they could be a conduit for that information.
Or we need the
absolutely.
kids to do well in school so they can
Right.
go to college.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that has a lot to do
So
with
improved
permanency
communications.
and supporting families.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
So,
She's did a good job writing up. You picked the right person.
She volunteered. I'm so happy.
But that wouldn't be, I mean, that, I like that one, but that wouldn't be my other choice, I think, in looking at this is really more around the evaluation and seeing what works and trying to figure out the more detailed information around the problems. Like you're suggesting needing to look at disruptions of HTCT. Well, I'm thinking of with Nicole, now we're finally getting to the point where we're not looking just at permanency and time to permanency, but how do certain services maybe relate to the increase or decrease of those outcomes?
Ah, that would be fascinating. Wow. So sort of some sort of outcome.
It is outcome, and it's beyond outcome trying to explain those outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of, sort of along those lines, Judy, one of the, I think, frustrations for the child welfare folks is, so they get a parent aid contract, they provide parent aid, they provide in-home, they report to DCS that this person's completed everything, and then that kind of goes to the courts. But they never get, and this is part of what they never get that whatever happened at the end thing, you know? So their question is, did all this effort did it actually help? Did the kid get to permanency? Because of all the information stuff, you know, their right to know anything kind of cuts off when their contract is, that client's case is closed. They may or may not have the kid if they come back for behavioral health or something. But I think maybe we're missing something by not just addressing kind of the needs for your folks to feel supported, but maybe some loop for all the people who work in all these things about how their effort contributed to good outcomes for children. And maybe, and I don't know how this might be done, but I'm just thinking that people feel they don't get that closure. They don't get that sense of how what they did contributed. And we don't get the sense of how do we ever measure outcomes. Because this person may successfully complete something, but how does that contribute to the family security or the ability for the child to come home or whatever? And I'm just wondering if maybe there ought to be some way in which different people could be, there could be some, I don't know what, case review or something where, you know, people got to figure out maybe it's what you would do. You put all the different interventions and treatment things together and say what really seemed to work for this family.
I think that can be part of it. I think there's a lot of different ways. One of the more exciting things we're doing these days with fostering sustainable connections is looking at measures of well-being. And that's been fascinating because through this one measure, we've seen how much higher the kids rate themselves on aspects of social emotional well-being than the caregivers rate the kids.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so that's interesting, but then also in implementing these tools, we find that it's a really good way to have conversations with kids about what matters to them beyond where they're living, you know, what foster family, what happens in their case next. So it's like things like what they have planned for their future. And that's really one of the things that matters to them most.
Yeah. How do they feel about themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that are going to have to do it. Okay, here's the really challenging part. I feel like almost everything on this list is a lot of it is sort of underway. right?
Yes.
So how do we, I was thinking that we could maybe prioritize a few of these to kind of focus on for the future, but do we think all of them sound like things that we want to have done? So let's talk about where we would go from here. We have the court and DCS communication. I don't know that there's much that this committee could do about that. Do you think?
I don't think so.
Okay, so let's,
Maybe we should.
Emily, I think the
DCS.
education one now, that was brought up, I think that's huge.
what?
The education communication.
Yeah, I think so. Robin said, why don't we ask you all what would be most helpful for you? Are there any of these that you feel like you're struggling with and we could help?
I think it depends on sort of what you're looking for in terms of the scope of a problem or an activity. And Judy, as you were talking about education around post-secondary education, that was actually brought up by youth when we had a youth convening recently, where they were saying it would be really helpful since we don't have parents to walk us through the college application. Like, how am I supposed to access scholarships? When do I start doing that? When do I take my SAT? They need that kind of detailed information, and they were saying, wouldn't it be cool if we had an app or something like that? But I mean, those are the kind of projects that sometimes we, the department, struggle to implement because we have so many things we're trying to do.
Right.
And that's a very particular type of project, so I don't know if that's the type of thing that you're looking at or something broader.
Well, if we look at what we're designed to do is to work at the pleasure of DCS and to bring the resources of the community to you to help you and to enhance your outcomes, right? I mean, that's what we're here for. So if you think in those terms, you've seen some of the things that we're working on that might impact what you're doing. Is there one or two that you would prioritize? Not that we can't report out on all of them as we go through the year, but one or two that you say, if I could have the community more engaged in this, we could move this forward faster. What does that look like to you? And I know this is a really hard question. So.
Maybe that requires we type these up and give them to you.
Maybe have you think about
broader
it.
conversations.
I think that could be helpful. I will say that the other thing that stood out that it seemed like a lot of you mentioned some role to play in this is identifying who's in the family network for that child and engaging them in whatever way that might be. But, that's something that we've been thinking about a lot because we just, those of us who are service providers or social workers or whatever our role is in the system, our time with the family is limited and we hope to do the best we can, but it's the family that's going to keep that child safe in the long haul. So what we're trying to do is find out who these people are and support them to be the network around that child and that family forevermore after we're gone. And so if we want to be successful in helping children be safe and well, that's what we need to do. And it sounds like, we're doing some things at the department around, TDM meetings and things like that. But, I love the idea of CASA's helping us to talk to children, using some of those tools through family finding. Certainly service providers can help us, engage people in that network. Schools often know who's involved with this child. You know who's been calling, you know who's coming to meetings and expressing concern, or who picks up the child from school. So it just seems like that's an issue that I could see broad application to lots of different communities.
It would be great if all this information could be organized somehow by goal and then the objective, and then listed so we could kind of think about it in a more informed, organized way, because this has kind of been brainstorming. Right. But I think there's some great information here, and maybe after it's organized, we might actually see some patterns or frequencies that would help us determine what we'd want to help with or be focused on.
Why don't I get somebody in my office to type this up And then we also want to circulate it to the people who are not here today and have them put themselves on the grid somewhere. Share it with you guys, and then at the next meeting, we can have a conversation that we've all sort of thought about a little more. Catherine, I'm thinking about what you just said. Let me just ask a question about this family finding thing, because the folks up in northern Arizona, the Coalition for Kids People, are putting on that big family finding training. So I think we're going to have more people in the various organizations more sensitive to this. But how do we share? How does CASA tell Denise, who is the foster parent child welfare agency for the child you're working with, that these 3 relatives might be open? I mean, is there any problem with exchanging that information?
I think those things have to be worked out, and I think it would be the court, if we moved forward, the court needs to work on what I understand to be an administrative court order to allow the CASAs to act in this role. But I think they are communicating with DCS directly on a per-case basis, and it would be up to DCS to speak or not speak as they see appropriate under the rules. I think that that's how I'm picturing it. Haven't worked it all the way through, but I think as far as, I mean, it might be interesting to have Bob Friend come and sit with this group and explain and give a presentation. But I think everybody's been touched already, so, but if you haven't been, maybe it's a website thing. I don't know.
I don't know that it's a website thing. So if CASA's allowed to do the investigation and they find a great aunt and a grandmother or something, and you tell DCS caseworker that, you know, here's who we found in the family, then does the DCS caseworker contact the child welfare agency?
What do you mean by child welfare?
Well, these are foster parents. These children are with foster parents. They might be orphans. They might be orphans.
Specifically, we were starting
The
with
child is
orphans.
living somewhere, right?
Right.
There's either a foster parent, there's a congregate
Usually
home.
the person doing the family finding is the one who reaches out to.
But here we have CASA doing it, not your agency.
Yeah, I don't
doing it.
know what the lines of.
So what I'm saying is, the child is an orphan, the child's in congregate care, okay?
Child probably doesn't have a licensing agency trying to find them right now, usually. There's very few head count in that area. So the reason that you would engage this new group is that you would have more feet on the street. If you've already got somebody doing family finding, you don't need a CASA.
Let's stop, okay. Take them out.
Okay,
You, CASA, are doing family finding.
going to.
When you find, talking to the child, that Aunt Mary might be somebody who would be engaged in this child's life, do you then communicate to whoever is running the organization where that child is living about that, or do you send that to DCS? And then DCS would go back then, it would be up to DCS to communicate to the congregate care somebody, right?
Well,
That-
at some point, but there's a whole process around this.
Yeah, there's a whole.
There's this, it's
Aunt Mary
very.
needs to be,
What?
Aunt Mary needs to be on board
Yeah.
before.
Right,
Yeah,
so it's
yeah.
calling Aunt Mary, it's calling 50 Aunt Marys.
Yeah.
It's identifying the tree, it's identifying, you know, where you're going. So just to give you an example, we visited with CASA in Oregon, who's doing this. She sits next to DCS in their offices. She's technically paid through CASA to sit there, and she works with CASAs, but she also works herself to do the family finding, and she's sitting right there with DCS. So they communicate on a regular basis. So who communicates once it's all pulled together, that would be up to DCS to make that decision. So
Okay, I'm just trying to,
that's kind of what happens today.
yeah, but this is why, you know, you have to have this kind of pay attention to how you're going to get the information. Because somebody has to allow the child to have these visits with this person. I mean, say Aunt Mary wants to come visit Johnny who's living in a group home.
Well,
How does the
there's
group home
steps
know?
before you get
Well, I
there.
understand that, but at the end,
Yeah.
when Johnny wants to see Aunt Mary, who allows Johnny to see Aunt Mary?
DCS. So I mean,
Okay.
I think that it's, you know, like in the fostering sustainable connections, there's the process of identifying who those people may be, And then you have to, you sometimes even need to do a LexisNexis search to try
Yes.
to find them.
Yep.
Contact them, and then we have blended perspective meetings where we have people come together and share what they, what their experiences have been around this child. Because some of the people we reach out to, they don't know this child anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
and
didn't know he was even in
didn't
care,
know he was in
or.
Didn't know he existed.
Right, and so
Yeah.
it's kind of everybody getting to know who this child is again, and then we have a specific type of team decision-making meeting as well, where some decisions can be made about what the best options are for this child in terms of who can provide care for the child, who can be a support, how can they be a support. So I think you're right, Emily, with these are the details that have to be worked out, and they have to be detailed and written down and
charted.
Yeah. No, I know, it gets to where everybody, has to be, somehow all of that permission stuff has to take place. So at the end, Johnny can meet Aunt Mary, or not, because Aunt Mary might turn out to be the local pedophile, and you don't want that to happen.
The local one?
As opposed to the international one.
No, yeah, as opposed to the international pedophile. Okay, so I'm trying to get back to the agenda here.
We're talking about something kind of similar in our community court team meetings, which is stakeholders from different provider groups that work with Birth to 3. But we're talking about how do different systems working with the families identify each other and communicate with each other.
Yeah, that's a
and
whole.
that might be something else that
That's a
we
whole
could do
ball of wax.
with this board and connect
Let's
to
add that
DCS.
to the list, shall we?
Yeah,
Let's do
that
that.
is a big issue.
Ensures.
And it's bigger than our one little group, and it's bigger than this group, but if we're working together on it.
Multi-systems coordination,
And
collaboration, something, yeah. Okay, we're not lacking. But I have to say, this has been fascinating, because I also feel like I have a much better idea of the role that you all are playing, because we probably needed to do this before. What if I take this back, we get it typed up, and we figure out some grid, some way to maybe just take this out another column and put, some things in there. What agencies, or what sector and what idea we could build on this. And then circulate it for discussion for the people who aren't here to add. And then
Then I would like to know,
and then at the next meeting, have DCS comment some on what they think would be most helpful. And then we can kind of also decide what we think might be more helpful, or there's a lot going on that has plenty of sector engagement. I think, and we may add some with the other folks on here. Law enforcement, not here today. You missing any? Well, we've got some input from Kris.
Dr. Conklin.
Oh, and Dr. Conklin, yeah.
but we could have cover 2 or 3 topics in a session and bring in experts to talk about those sessions and dive into, each one of them and see what we can come up with as far as valuable information that we can share or new connections we can make, things like that. So I think it kind of, we don't have to always, we can prioritize where we start, but I think
Yeah.
we could cover, and sometimes you might be able to cover 2 in one meeting and bring the experts and work through issues. And it just was helpful today to talk things out, like you said.
So let me ask the DCS folks. Catherine, when we are I'm assuming that there's a person in charge of every goal or every objective or something?
If you go down into the app, if you look at this online, it gives you the name of the person who's in charge.
Yeah, I understand. Would it be possible if we're going to talk about goal 1, say at a meeting, would that individual who's in charge of that be able to come and be part of the conversation? We can start with all of yours, because you've got a lot of them.
I think the other thing too is that it might be helpful even to break it down into some of the objective areas. There are different people involved in the different objectives, and you probably want to get to that level of detail.
Yeah.
And Emily, I was thinking as well that, I'm not exactly clear on how what kind of work you're looking for. If it's a matter of having meetings to drill into some of these topic areas where we're explaining what we're doing and you're giving us advice on those as opposed to producing something.
I don't think that, let me just give you sort of how I think this might work.
Okay.
So Dell represents the schools, the K-12 basically, or whatever, wherever we start. What if Kay asked a couple of other school superintendents or other people in the school system to come and we had a conversation about even what we could do for kinship families or how kinship families could access information, and we just, it's not even necessarily that you all have to do anything other than there's a link on your website that they could link to. But I have a feeling that we could come up with some other, I know when I worked with Amphi School District in Tucson, we actually ended up with an IGA between the school district and DCS on exchanging information because to find out what kids needed, maybe some extra help or whatever. There was an opportunity to actually exchange information that currently you can't. And that's kind of way down the road. But we could have, I think you could find a couple of people, Del, from the schools who would share your perspective, right?
Well, and I've already jotted down and belong to a couple organizations that are just superintendents
Right.
throughout the state. So I was thinking I could send out a few questions that I've jotted down just to get some feedback from more than my perspective
Right.
in my district.
So then we could invite a couple of those folks to come and talk about what they feel is a gap between DCS and the schools. And out of that, we could come up with some ideas. I don't think we're looking at creating more work for you. We're supposed to be a resource to help.
Right, yeah, so that example is good because I think that's exactly, it could be very helpful. We do have a lot of materials that talk about resources to kinship caregivers, but I think, having broader input from schools, which I think is a gap. I don't think we get a lot of that. And to have a group of people maybe look at those materials and say, do they speak well? Are these things that we would find useful? Do they seem to be written in a way that people would understand? Do we know how to access them? And giving us some advice on how to make that better. Not to create like big, new, huge projects. I mean, that's always the danger, is that we don't have a lot of people. You ask for advice, you get it. You should do something with it, right? and we don't want to get in a position where we can't act on what you're giving us. But I think those types of information and feedback on what we have, or we can, fine tune and.
Or you might even find that you put in the resource packet that you give to kinship families when they, I guess is there something like that for them that you also do for foster parents? Huh?
Are you talking about the placement packet?
Yeah.
Those go to both.
They go to both, and that has a link to that, like AZ Family Resources,
Right.
the one that AZ does.
Yeah.
But you might even say, if, you might want to check in with your schools, blah, 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 to let them know that you're responsible for this child and see if there are any ways that you could help or something. I mean, sometimes just planning that.
And I think, you talked some about, what are other communities doing and what does the strategic plan have and how can we support that? And I think, again, your example is a really good one because timing is important too. So we have, just expanded this statewide placement unit. They are working right now on what kinship support should look like. So to have a meeting that can inform them and have some of those people here to hear directly from you how they can use all of your areas to support kinship caregivers and foster parents, and so that's just one example. But I think that
So maybe that would be actually just a good place to start, is to just have them come in and talk about what they're doing at the next meeting, and then we've got enough people here to, have a dialogue, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and I think the other thing we can add here, so, right, you don't want to agree to something and then go off and now you have a project. And, if there's dollars associated, then we got those issues. If there are nonprofits that are completely dedicated to fostering kinship, bring those nonprofits out. They may go, I would love to, be part of the messaging and printing and whatever it is that would come out of that discussion. So it doesn't necessarily have to mean you own it. You can bless it, but it can be done outside.
So the idea is to kind of, there's just a huge amount of knowledge and resource information just sitting here. And I don't feel like we've really been able to, it's kind of been a, what you tell us, it's kind of that one-way deal, but we haven't really been coming back with anything. So I think let's start with that. And I think that kinship thing is a real big issue for all of us from our different perspectives. So should we do that for the next meeting? And then we can also go through this process thing, but we could do both. So we start with, maybe Ben, we start with completing the process, and then part two is to start with the kinship.
For the next meeting?
That's for the next meeting, and then we have to have a little conversation about when the next meeting is going to be. And that first requires us to discuss about, we need to have a standing meeting schedule, because it is, Ben's going nuts with his doodle polls trying to find some time. And I think we need to pick a time, but we also need to pick how often do you want to meet. I think we need to meet either every month or every 2 months. I think if you meet quarterly, you just lose all your
Completely agree.
synergy and everything. So what would be your preference, guys?
We tried meeting every month, we tried meeting quarterly, maybe we should try meeting every other month.
I don't think we're ever able to actually get the meetings scheduled every month, so I don't know if we got to meet every month. Like,
No,
we didn't. We wanted to meet every month, but we just couldn't get it
We were lucky
scheduled
to
on a
get
day that
quarterly.
worked for
I think that's
the
true.
majority.
I think that's true.
I think we need to pick a day of the month and a time, and
Have people
we do
come.
that we do that bi-monthly, and that's the meeting. Now, if we can't get it, we couldn't get a quorum, is what you're saying? Okay. Well, I think we've got a little bit more reason for people to come, so let's try. So this is October, and of course, we're going to run right into late
Well, how
late
about if we
December.
try November and then go every month from there?
Good idea. So this
Maybe
is,
we advertise what's going to happen at the next one.
Yeah.
In a real positive, here's all the people coming, here's the outcomes, here's what we're going to do. So almost,
Little
sell it to
rah-rah.
the team.
I can do that when I send this out.
Right.
Okay, we have had a number of meetings. From 2 to 4 seems like it works as a time. This is Friday. I don't know this is everybody's favorite time to meet, but is later in the month a better time than early in the month, just because of all the other meetings that I have that are all on the first of the month? So let's look at late November. I'd like to keep some energy here. I just feel like we've been,
So would the fourth Friday work, the 29th? Or no, that's December, sorry.
well, that doesn't matter. It's December 1, but there's nothing that says we couldn't meet on December 1. Would you like to try Friday, December 1?
Yes.
How is that is everybody, we have a quorum, so
Yeah.
if we could guarantee a
Yeah.
quorum. Ben, does that work?
What time are you?
2 to 4?
First.
December 1st?
Mhm.
Does that
I
work?
think if it works for all of you.
Yes.
well, it
Okay.
works.
I have a meeting with a legislator, but I could try to cut it short. My problem is distance, so.
Where are you meeting the legislator?
I'm trying to get him to
Oh,
tour my
tour your
school
school
district for the 4th time. So that, I had that confirmed already with him,
Okay.
but he's canceled the other 3, so.
Well, there's always that possibility.
Yeah.
But you could call in as soon as you get out of your
Yes,
meeting.
absolutely.
Yeah,
There you go. That's a good.
yeah,
Could be.
okay.
And I could try to cut it short.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe you could move him up. But you come from Cave Creek, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty far. Okay, so let me iterate what we're going to do. Some unlucky person in my office is going to type all this up. And that's probably going to be me. That's my feeling. And we will get it to DCS, and we will get it out to everybody, and I will ask the people who weren't here to provide something that we can add. At the next meeting, which will be December 1, from 2 to 4, and Ben will let us know where that's going to be. We will select our focus, what we want to do out of these areas, or if we want to try to cover all of them. We'll go through and decide which ones we want to address over the course of the year, and probably try to create some sort of schedule. And we can combine a couple of them, right? Yes?
So
Denise?
I'm just
Yes.
wondering
Yeah.
if the first Friday of the month or every other month works. Because oddly enough, it's like, oh, that kind of works. I don't know if it does for other people.
Could we like check it and,
Yeah.
Well, it's not going to work in January, but we wouldn't be meeting in January if we did February.
Right.
Yeah.
So if people could look, if the first Friday,
Thank
every
you,
other
Denise.
month, starting December, works.
So that would be Groundhog Day, February 2nd.
Yep.
I could do that.
Or put it on your calendar. Geez, good idea, Denise. This is groupthink, guys. It's good.
Saving
Okay,
guys.
and then we do April? What, Ben?
I'm sorry, no. It was a sidebar.
Okay. Are we talking about April the 2nd? No, wait. No. I'm sorry. April the 6th, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, could do that one. We're on a roll.
June? I'm not doing this the most efficient way. Okay, June, oh my gosh.
Yep, June 1st.
So far, so good.
I know, right?
I can't do June 1st, but I might be able to call in.
Okay,
Well, that gets us the first half of the year. and
Sure does.
I think we could wait on the
Just
last
get
half,
that
'cause
Outlook.
After that, it'll be.
If we
it's
send
too
the
far out,
Outlook
people will-
invitations.
Is that something you can send out to everybody?
Would you do that?
Perfect.
Good, then I'm going to start typing up my phone.
okay, so hey, that's wonderful. Thank you, Denise. Okay, so we've got a schedule. We're going to start with kinship, and you're going to have whoever hears. And I think we're going to basically do this as a dialogue between your folks and the folks on the committee. Are we going to want to bring any other folk? If we really had full committee participation, I don't think we need anybody else. I mean, if we had Kris here and we had, right?
But if there were some nonprofits who wanted to come, they would not be speaking, but they could be in the audience in here.
And if we know what we're speaking about at the next meeting, or which area of the strategic plan or the objectives, we can gather information from our colleagues to
Right.
bring to that meeting.
Yeah. So, but we can set the item on the agenda. So, you know, if you had somebody who really would like to speak to the issue, then, you know, we could arrange that. But I think for the kinship topic, let's just keep it with the committee and the DCS staff. Because I think there's plenty of enriched conversation. And we'll only have about half the meeting because we've got to do this other time. So are you clear, Ben, on the agenda? Okay. So are we good?
We're good.
Thank you guys, really a lot. I feel like I really benefited a lot from this conversation.
5 o'clock meetings.
So I would have a motion to adjourn.
I second. Well, I will do a motion to adjourn.
Okay, everybody in favor of adjournment? Thank you.